Sometime in June 1952, around 11 o'clock at night, a young man is walking home from a movie along the Little Spring Creek in Tennessee when he hears weird music and singing coming from across the creek. As he looked to see who was making this bizarre noise, his attention is attracted by a group of bright lights hovering on the ground across the water. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just another tinfoil hat. Welcome to my show. Today, we are going to be discussing the fascinating case of the Little Spring Creek Singers. Around 11 o'clock in the evening, sometime in June 1952, a 22-year-old man by the name of Carl Haynes was walking back from a movie along the Little Spring Creek in Hickman County, Tennessee, when he heard what he described as strange bagpipe-like music accompanied by high-pitched singing. Thinking that he had come across a, quote, bunch of drunks having a wild party, he looked to see what the ruckus was and instead saw what he described as the brightest lights he had ever seen on the other side of the creek. As he continued walking closer to the proximity of this object, he saw what he described as 4 or 5 short men dancing around some central object. He said that they each held something which looked like a gun. Carl claimed that this central object was some shiny silvery thing that looked like 2 saucers stuck together, with a translucent ball or dome on top with rotating lights. This accounted for the bright lights that Carl claimed to have seen, which he described as extremely brilliant blue and orange, and so bright that he couldn't stand to look at them. The objects stood on 4 legs, with round objects at the end, and a single center spike. After about 10 minutes of Carl watching this bizarre musical troupe, they began packing up, putting things, who knows what that means, into the object. At this point, he claimed that he felt like they knew about him, that they sensed his presence and would have done something about it. However, he claimed that they came right up to the edge of the creek and would not cross it. His belief was that the creek was the only thing that saved him from whatever it is these beings intended to do to him. Carl claimed that the beings entered the object, which rose, whistling in a corkscrew sort of motion. Now, when he visited the site of the occurrence sometime afterwards, he claimed that he did find impressions in the dirt of the strange legs or feet of the craft, as well as many marks of narrow, heelless footprints. So this is one heck of a weird case. I mean, it bears striking resemblance, if not downright exactitude, to so many encounters from the fairy faith. I mean, countless stories detail these tales of lone travelers hearing strange music and then seeing the good people dancing around and singing. It's just that in this case, these beings were dancing around a flying saucer instead of a bonfire. Oddly enough, and also kind of across the lines of belief, the description of heelless footprints I have to admit, it sounds kind of like hoof prints, perhaps a call out to the weird, wonderful world of demonology. On the topic of trace evidence, yet again we have this extremely bizarre, ridiculous encounter, one that I personally would be tempted to say lands exclusively in the lands of subjective experience, which somehow leaves an objective trace on reality, which can be kind of verified after the fact. I wish that there was a little bit more detail to the weird gun-like objects that the beings were holding, as the objects held across many different encounters, such as the glowing chains or rods in the Honeycutt encounter, the small handheld mirror in the Cusack encounter, even the kind of goblet or flask that Joe Simonton was given by the beings in the Simonton encounter. They all seem to be very similar. They seem to tend to be these small handheld, usually lighted or reflective objects. Again, I think that some of this has to do with the fact that it often seems too like the objects are made out of the same, sort of material, if we can even call it material, as the main object, the quote, flying saucer. And so often too, it seems to be yet another connection to, again, light or reflection, something that's shiny or brilliant, which yet again here we also have yet another case where it includes this brilliant light that almost hurts his eyes to look at. Again, just kind of pointing out the integral nature of light in these anomalous encounters. However, my favorite aspect of this encounter has got to be the waterway. Carl claimed that he felt as though the beings were going to do something about him, and that the only reason he was saved was because of the creek between them. I did an episode a while back on the prevalence of water in paranormal encounters, and this is a perfect example. These so-called UFO occupants were stopped like legions of demons, ghosts, and vampires before them by running water. And as researcher Paul Fuller noted in a comment on this case in Ted Phillips' Physical Trace Catalog, why on Earth or off of Earth would entities which apparently have mastered space travel be stopped by a lowly creek? And I really think the best answer is this. They're not actually super advanced spacefaring beings, but simply a different mask to add to the mix of demons, fairies, and cryptids, you name it, for whatever the source of anomaly truly is. Something lurking just across the border of our subconscious mind, perhaps unable or unwilling to cross it. Well, if you enjoyed this episode on the Little Spring Creek Singers, please like, and if you're new to this field of crop circles, go ahead and subscribe to see what weirdness the future may have in store. Till then, you can keep up with me on my free blog at patreon.com/justanothertinfoilhat. And for today, I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.
Doing.